no van a poder con Venezuela. Somos invencibles. Hagan lo que hagan. No han podido ni podrán jamás con nuestra patria. Jamás.
He has offered everything. He's offered everything. You're right. You know why? Because he doesn't want to around with the United States.
Well, the current nature of the conflict is really not so much a conventional war between the U.S. and Venezuela as a rapidly escalating militarized confrontation in a kind of gray zone, somewhere between counter-narcotics, counterterrorism, and regime change. You know, on the U.S. side, three big moves have really sharpened the tensions. And the first is treating these two cartel-like organizations, the Tren de Agua and the Cartel de los Soles, as foreign terrorist organizations. And this has explicitly tied criminal networks to the Venezuelan state and to the President Maduro himself. The second escalatory move by the U.S. is this launch of the so-called Operation Southern Spear, which is a massive buildup of naval and air assets spanning the entire Caribbean and targeting alleged drug trafficking boats. And the third big shift is these kinetic strikes that we've been seeing to the north of Venezuela, just off the coastline, over as far as Colombia, up by the Dominican Republic. And so far, we've seen over 20 strikes and more than 80 people killed since the early part of September, despite there not being much public evidence about who was on board or much less what they're carrying. On the Venezuelan side, you're seeing a major mix of asymmetric signaling and escalatory rhetoric, and even the mobilization of its regular forces and tens of thousands, perhaps hundreds of thousands of militia. And I think faced with this massive military buildup, Maduro is continuing to present himself as kind of open to dialogue, even as he threatens a military response. Real concern is that the legal norms of what is proportionate in sort of situations of escalating conflict are being really stretched. And we're seeing international legal scholars and human rights experts, and even folks inside the United States government arguing that these strikes on suspected drug traffickers on boats off the coast of Venezuela, that they fall outside of the accepted frameworks for self-defense or maritime interdiction, and they might even be amounting to something like extrajudicial killings. And as a result, we're seeing some countries like the US or UK and the Netherlands and Colombia distancing themselves from the United States for fear of being implicated in some of these transgressions. The second, I think, big concern regionally is that the risk of accidents and miscalculation is really climbing quickly. When you have this kind of buildup of military assets from multiple countries operating in a congested area, and you see this rhetoric increasingly inflamed and the tensions growing, and even Russian airplanes landing in Venezuela itself as recently as last month, a single misidentified vehicle or a near miss of an aircraft or a clash with a patrol boat, that could trigger a rapid escalation that I don't think either side necessarily has planned out. When it comes to the U.S. opening a dialogue with Maduro, the honest answer is yes, the U.S. could accept opening back channels to Maduro. In fact, there is some suspicion that these channels are currently being used, but only in quite narrow and I would say deniable ways. The other, I think, caveat to mention is that a lot of political capital has already been expended on Maria Corina Machado and the opposition that she represents, or the faction of opposition that she represents, as the kind of legitimate democratic voice of Venezuela. And that's really been strengthened in the last couple of months after she won the Nobel Peace Prize. So anything that looks like Trump is rehabilitating Maduro risks upsetting the opposition in Venezuela, as well as Trump's base, as well as key U.S. allies who back that line. And then you've got sort of domestic pressure within the United States to take a hard line on Maduro, especially from Florida. Marco Rubio, state secretary, has made has made it very clear his particular allegiances and his hard line against Cuba as well as Venezuela. And he's backed by pretty powerful voices in Miami. So and this hard line is echoed by other hawks across the U.S. administration, including people like Christopher Landau in the NSC and others who see Maduro's removal as a kind of strategic objective, not, and really part of the plan.